So there we have it. Following the news confirming Logan Sargeant as a 2023 Williams F1 driver, we finally have our complete grid for the 2023 Formula 1 Championship. 2023 will mark the second year under the dramatic new technical regulations, as well as the third year under the new financial regulations, so we should have a very interesting season on our hands. And looking at the 2023 F1 grid, we've also got an interesting season ahead on track with the usual 20 drivers and 10 teams. We've got drivers from 14 different countries, being the Netherlands, Mexico, Monaco, Spain, the United Kingdom, Australia, Finland, China, France, Japan, Denmark, Germany, Canada, and finally, for the first time since 2015, a driver from the United States of America. Also on the grid are 3 F1 World Champions with 11 titles between them and 10 race winners collectively with 193 wins. So with half the grid having won a race, we should be in for a great season. And here is how the grid is lined up. At Red Bull we've got reigning champion Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez. At Ferrari we've got Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. At Mercedes we've got Lewis Hamilton and George Russell. Alpine have Esteban Ocon and new signing Pierre Gasly. McLaren also have a new driver in Oscar Piastri alongside Lando Norris. Alfa Romeo have the same lineup of Valtteri Bottas and Guan Yu Zhou. For this year, Fernando Alonso goes to Aston Martin alongside Lance Stroll. Haas have the experienced lineup of Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hülkenberg. AlphaTauri have the shortest lineup of all time with Yuki Tsunoda and Nyck de Vries. And finally, Williams have stuck with Alex Albon and brought in American rookie Logan Sargeant. So what can we expect with each lineup? Well, there's a lot to consider on and off the track with drivers at new teams with new teammates as well as current teammates with a point to prove. So without further ado, let's start with Red Bull. Firstly, Max Verstappen is now a 2-time reigning world champion and is currently in the form of his life on a level above any other driver around. So I have no doubt he'll be a serious force next year. He just needs to be a little nicer to his teammate. Sergio Perez meanwhile serves as a perfect number 2 for Max and will prove to be a serious weapon for Verstappen going for another title. Overall, I don't think he'll challenge for a title, but if the Red Bull is strong, he should get a win or two. When it comes to Ferrari, Charles Leclerc has shown he can be blisteringly quick with the potential to be world champion, but his main weakness is his mental strength, shown in 2022 crashing on a few occasions. But if Ferrari don't turn things around internally, then I don't feel there's any chance for a championship. Carlos Sainz meanwhile I feel is very underrated, but due to a lot of bad luck, he's not seen as a challenger, but I certainly wouldn't count him out. Mercedes in my opinion have the strongest lineup. Firstly, Lewis Hamilton needs no introduction. If he's given a truly competitive car, then he is a serious contender. He may have been beaten by Russell, but his progress over the season speaks volumes. As for George Russell, he's shown he has what it takes to also challenge for a title, with his pace and mainly his consistency, so he should have a shout at the title as well. Alpine boast an all-French lineup with Esteban Ocon, who had an impressive 2022 alongside Fernando Alonso. Even though Alonso suffered more bad luck, Ocon did beat him in the championship, so keep an eye on it. His teammate Pierre Gasly, however, does have a point to prove, having had a very quiet and disappointing 2022. Main thing for him is he needs to find a competitive car to get some form again. When it comes to McLaren, you've got Lando Norris, who speaks for himself. He's been impressive since joining F1 and all he needs now is a good car and he could definitely get some wins. His new teammate Oscar Piastri, however, is not such a certainty. He's had a seriously impressive junior career and after all the controversy with Alpine, he is expected to deliver quite highly and that comes with a lot of pressure. Alfa Romeo have Valtteri Bottas, who as we know is a very reliable driver who with a good car can put in some solid performances. He did struggle in the middle part of the season, but expect to see some great performances from him next year. Guan Yu Zhou, however, needs to perform more if he wants to stay in the sport after being beaten 49 points to 6. Fernando Alonso goes to Aston Martin after arguably being a top 3 driver in 2022, but his move to Aston was an interesting one. All I see is it becoming a political nightmare with Lance Stroll's dad as the team owner. On the other hand, I don't feel Lance should really be in Formula 1, having been in the sport for 6 years, but we know with a good car he can perform well. Haas's experienced lineup includes Kevin Magnussen, who had a mixed 2022 with a brilliant start but slowly petered out as the season went along, In many cases, he was beaten by his now dropped teammate Schumacher in the second half of that season. Nico Hülkenberg, meanwhile, is a pretty big question mark, returning full-time to F1 since 2019. But I'm sure he'll prove valuable for Haas. AlphaTauri have kept Yuki Tsunoda, who has a real make-or-break season on his hands, as his contract ends at the end of this season. So I feel with a lot of Red Bull talent waiting for a call-up, he really needs to beat his teammate De Vries. De Vries, meanwhile, is a really exciting prospect, showing great pace and maturity after that performance in Italy last season. If he does well, he could definitely be a replacement for Perez at Red Bull. And finally, Williams have Alex Albon, who simply needs a much better car to prove himself. Much like George Russell at Williams, he has been impressive, but it doesn't really count for anything. Whereas with Logan Sargeant, I'm a bit apprehensive as he only finished 4th in the F2 season, and I feel the main reason he got a call up is to bring in the American audiences. But it would be really great to see him do well. So those are the lineups and how I reckon they'll do. But now let's look into who the overachievers and underachievers might be. Now I do feel that the majority of the grid will fill the expectations we have for them, whether that's good or bad. So I've only got 3 overachievers and 4 underachievers, with one of them that might surprise you. So my first overachiever I think will be Esteban Ocon. In my opinion, he's the second most underrated driver on the grid. He beat Alonso in equal machinery last year, which I know included quite a few DNFs for Alonso, but the fact he even came this close to him shows a lot. And with Alonso gone, he'll be the most established driver at Alpine against a teammate who's not in great form. The next overachiever I think will be Nyck de Vries. He's an incredibly quick driver who's got experience in quite a few F1 teams, acting as a reserve or test driver, which is why he was such hot property. Now, that performance in Italy was simply insane. It shows not just how much talent he has, but also how mature he is. He's been waiting 3 years to get this opportunity, so I'm sure he'll make the most of it when it comes. Next up, I think Carlos Sainz will overachieve. In many people's opinion, he is the most underrated driver on the grid. Firstly, he beat Charles in his first ever season at Ferrari, and towards the end of 2022, he was looking very quick. What I do think is that if Ferrari isn't challenging for the title, I do feel like Sainz could beat Leclerc once again. And now for my underachievers. First up, I've got Sergio Perez. Following Brazil, where Max refused to let him through, I don't think Sergio feels valued in that Red Bull team, and I do feel he will lose a bit of motivation. He knows winning a championship won't happen with Max as his teammate, so I think he will struggle quite a bit next year. Next up, I've got Pierre Gasly as someone I think will underachieve. He's coming off the back of a lackluster 2022 into a brand new team against a childhood rival in Esteban Ocon. I feel this unpredictability will throw him off quite a bit. And don't forget, the last time he moved to a team other than AlphaTauri or Toro Rosso was Red Bull, and we all know how that went. My third underachiever I think will be Yuki Tsunoda. I actually think Yuki won't stay in Formula 1 in 2024. Red Bull have so much great talent waiting in the wings to replace him, so if he doesn't beat De Vries, which I'm almost certain he won't, then he'll most likely get the boot. And now my final underachiever is Fernando Alonso. Now I'm certain a lot of you don't agree with me on this, but I really don't see it going well with him and Aston Martin. We know Alonso is a very political driver inside a team, and with a team owner who has his son as Alonso's teammate. So yeah, I really don't see Alonso tolerating any favouritism, as well as the fact that Aston Martin is simply pretty slow. So there we have it, that is my take on the 2023 Formula World Championship drivers. It's rearing up to be a really exciting year with Mercedes hopefully back in the fight against Red Bull, and with lots of new talent and new driver pairings, it's looking like we've got a good year on our hands. But it would be great to hear how you guys feel about each driver, so make sure to leave a comment below.